Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Starting and Understanding Nonprofits webinar. Just going to start off by saying that this webinar is being recorded and the presentation is also going to be emailed to you along with the link to the recording. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Before we get started here, we'd like to take a quick poll. So we're just going to have two questions that's going to come up on your screen right now. And the questions are you considering starting a nonprofit? And have you developed a business plan for your nonprofit? So we'll give it about 30 seconds for you to complete those, please. Okay, thank you everyone for taking that poll. I'll go ahead and share the results here so everyone can see. So 79% of you are considering starting a nonprofit, and 86% of you have not developed a business plan yet for the nonprofit. All right. Thank you for taking that poll. And I just want to let everyone know, this is the landing page to centralvalleyscore.org. And here you can click on take a workshop here at the top. And it's going to give you the list of workshops that are coming up, and you can click on them and register for them on that website. Once again, that link is centralvalleyscore.org. And I'd like to go ahead and pass it off to Peter Fong. Peter's our district director for Central Valley SCORE. And
well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Christina. You know, during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, many nonprofits are born through the needs and wants of the community. You know, our government can only provide so much for us out there, but we have so many terrific nonprofits that have started through a crisis, and the needs is probably greater now than it ever has been. So hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions for you. And if you already have a nonprofit, we're going to share some of the challenges of maintaining your nonprofit, and probably the number one criteria is funding. And we'll touch on that a little bit today. But I'm really pleased to share with you today is Tom Sims, who's been in the business for over 30 years, and he understands nonprofits, and more importantly, he has some good hands-on experience for you. So Tom, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and have a great webinar.
Thank you, Peter, and I want to welcome all of you. I'm delighted that you're here and that you are interested in giving back to the community. There is a trend not to define what we do by what we don't do. Namely, we are nonprofit organizations, and that's our legal designation. But what do we do? There is another name we can use for what we do. We are community benefit organizations. We exist for the benefit of the community, to give back to the community. We're owned by the community. We're not owned by any individuals. And all of the benefits of what nonprofits do accrues to the community, who, as a collective, do profit greatly from the work of these community benefit organizations. So let's look at the next slide, and I want to welcome you and commend you for what you are thinking about. Today, we're going to touch to these issues, and they are typically the types of nonprofits and structure, the purpose of nonprofits, starting a nonprofit, the challenges of starting a nonprofit, selecting a board of directors. I think I want to say that twice because I think it is so crucial. Selecting a board of directors, funding sources, and recruiting and retention. Next one, Christina. The question is, do we need nonprofit organizations? Do we need community benefit organizations? And I think the answer, obviously for me, I guess 45 years. Peter generously reduced my age a little bit by saying over 30 years, but I guess about 45 years of being in the nonprofit sector, I've come to realize that what you and I do in giving back to the community, in being responsible to the community, is absolutely necessary for building healthy communities. We provide critical services. These services contribute to economic stability and mobility. They strengthen the communities. These people are led, these organizations are led by the people in the community, responsible to the community. Books are open to the community, and they are often the voice of the people they serve. Not only that, but government depends upon these organizations. You're not given a special treatment on taxation and the ability for people to make tax deductible contributions just because the government wants to be nice to you. It's because it is recognized that you can do some things as a nonprofit organization more efficiently, more economically, and with greater local accountability than a large entity centered in Washington, D.C. And therefore, many of the funds that are designated for community development will trickle down from the government to these local organizations. So yes, we need you. We need your vision. We need your passion. We need your hard work. We need your commitment. And we need you to do what you do well. And so we're committed to helping you do that well. Next. So you could be a not-for-profit. Actually, I know a lot of for-profit businesses that don't earn a profit. That doesn't qualify you to be either a nonprofit or a not-for-profit. But that is one area of possibility that exists. But a nonprofit organization, NPO, is one that qualifies for tax-exempt status by the IRS because its mission and purpose are to further a social cause and provide a public benefit. This could be hospitals, universities, national charities, foundations, but it also can include those very local organizations that are so small that they don't even have a full-time staff member, or organizations that are like churches and religious organizations. These are entities that are absolutely necessary to the community, as distinguished from simply a not-for-profit organization that does not earn a profit for its owners. Neither of these categories earn a profit for their owners, because the organization, what really defines a non-profit is not that they don't have income, and it's not that they can't actually have a business that generates income. It's that none of the funds accrue to the profit of any owners. And that's because technically it's the community that owns the organization. Now the community, that's kind of an ethereal concept, but it is the community that owns the nonprofit, not any individuals. Next slide, Christina. So what's a foundation and what's a nonprofit? Some people are struggling with this. Am I starting a foundation or am I starting a nonprofit? And foundations are very similar to nonprofits, except that the money a foundation raises, it usually comes from a family or a corporate entity, and maybe multiple corporate entities and maybe multiple families. One of the most famous foundations in America would be the Ford Foundation, which makes millions of dollars in grants every year to nonprofits. Nonprofit money comes from their revenues, their donations, and grants, some of which come from foundations. Another source of income for nonprofits might be government contracts, like an organization that provides counseling services to victims of crime. That money may come from the State Attorney General's office, for instance, or some other government entity, or maybe even a local entity. So here's an easy way to remember it. Foundations receive money that they give away. And nonprofits receive money. They also receive money from foundations, and they put that money to work in service to the community. Next slide, Christina. So what's a nonprofit? A nonprofit is technically an organization that qualifies for tax-exempt status by the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, because its mission and purpose are to further a social cause and provide a public benefit. Now, that's a very important distinction because you can't offer a tax-deductible status for your donation to your donors unless you've been recognized by the Internal Revenue Service to do so. And the Internal Revenue Service also recognizes that there's no one to tax because it's the community that owns the organization, so there are certain tax benefits. Of course, nonprofits still have to pay payroll taxes on their employees. They have to pay certain taxes that that everyone pays, that every organization pays, but they are exempt from most of the taxes, including corporate taxes and income taxes. And these would include organizations like Amnesty International, the Better Business Bureau, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, Boy Scouts of America, Cato Institute, Central Valley Community Foundation, which is one of our great organizations here locally, Habitat for Humanity of the greater Fresno area, and Central Valley SCORE. Next slide. So what's the difference between a 501c and a 501c3? Well, it's kind of the section number in the IRS code. 501c has a long list. If you go online to the irs.gov, you can see a list of different kinds of organizations that are covered under 501c. But a 501c3 is a particular kind of tax-exempt organization. They may all be tax-exempt, but a 501c organization without the 3 may not allow its donors to write off donations in many cases. For instance, I am a member of a national organization called Toastmasters International, but it exists for educational purposes. It's a nonprofit organization, but we can't raise money for charity. That's against the law. And if I were a member of a club that required me to pay dues to be a member, those dues would not be tax deductible for me because they have strings attached, because I accrue benefits from it. And it's all the technicalities of the law that have been thought of ahead of time by our wise fathers in Washington. Now, a 501c3 organization lets its donors take tax deductions on their contributions. Now, you're here because you want to start or have started a 501c3 organization, which exists for a community benefit and no owners, and it does not exist for the benefit of its members primarily. Although its members, if it has members, will receive certain intrinsic benefits. Next slide. Now, examples. You've seen over here on the left, 501c3, Amnesty, Better Business Bureau, Big Brothers, Boy Scouts, Cato, Child Voice International, Global Giving, GGIP, SCORE. And over in the other category, for instance, there's a 501c4, civic leagues, social welfare organizations, local associations of employees, Rotary. 501c5 would be labor, agricultural, horticultural organizations. 501c6, business leagues, chambers of commerce, real estate boards, and 501c7, for instance, social and recreational clubs like the USO. You remember the USO? It's still around, still doing good. If you ever watched the old Bob Hope specials in the war zones from YouTube, then you know who sponsored them. The USO organization takes care of many of the needs of our troops overseas. Next slide. So what do you do about starting it? This is what you're here for. probably already know what I've said before, but number one, do your homework. Conduct a needs analysis. Is there a need for what you have a passion to begin, a vision to begin, an idea? Is there a place for your idea in the community? Do people need it? Does it address something that is a hole that needs to be filled? You know, last year, the hardware stores in America sold hundreds of thousands of drills. Do you know what? Very few of the people who bought those drills were looking for a drill. You know what they were looking for? They were looking for a hole. They needed a hole. And so what we do with these organizations is fill a gap, fill a need. And the tools that we bring to it are the organizations that we form. So do your homework, do your analysis, do your demographic studies, get some help, talk to people. Number two, build a solid foundation. And that solid foundation begins with drafting a mission statement. The mission statement is something that is 11 words, maybe fewer, maybe a couple more, you can stretch it, but not many. It is something that you can memorize. Every member of your board memorizes it. Every member of your staff memorizes it. You pinch them and immediately the mission statement comes out of their mouth, because it is your reason for being. It is your why. It is your why. It's why you exist and continue to exist. It's why people should support you. Number three, incorporate. You've reached this step. It's time to find your resources that are specific to your location, but you have to incorporate. Now, the first step in incorporation is go on the web. We can get you that link. I didn't put that link in, but it's it's at ca. Whatever the California domain name is, but it's the Secretary of State's office, and then you can kind of search for incorporating a nonprofit corporation in California. Now, if you just Google that, you're going to get a lot of people that want to charge you. You can go to many websites and it'll be, you know, oh, $100 you can incorporate. Well, you can incorporate in 5 or 10 minutes for a lot less just by going directly to that website. And it is a fill-in PDF form. You can do it online. You can pay the small registration fee for incorporating a nonprofit corporation in California. It wouldn't hurt to have someone guide you through that process to make sure you write the correct categories down. But then you will be a nonprofit corporation in the state of California. You can get your EIN number from the Internal Revenue Service, open a bank account. You can do all that kind of thing legally in California. You are a legal entity in California. You've not yet been recognized by the Internal Revenue Service. That's not, hasn't happened yet. You may be in reality a 501c3 corporation because intrinsically you are, but you've not been recognized. So you can't offer tax deductible opportunities for your donors. So that's why you want to file your 501c3 tax exempt status paperwork. And we'll address a little bit of that later. And you might need some help with that. That's a little more complicated than your than incorporating in the state of California. Step 5 is you ensure ongoing compliance. You need to understand what the laws are that regulate and govern how nonprofits operate, not only in the United States, but also and more specifically in the state where you reside, and in our case, California. Next slide. I kind of snuck up on you there, Christina, but I'm ready for the next one. Okay. So you don't have any money. Well, welcome to the club. So how do you start a nonprofit with no money? Well, develop your core values. Sit down and you've already done your mission statement, right? So you want to think about what do we value? What's important to us? What sets us apart? What makes us unique? So you can describe your organization to other people who want to know. and then research costs and create a budget. You say, well, I don't have any money. How can I create a budget? You create a budget based on what it's going to take to do what you need to do. That's what you, and then you go out and you start looking for the money. But you research the costs and create a budget. And there are going to be some hidden costs. There are going to be some things you haven't thought about. And you hopefully can avail yourself of a mentor to walk with you through that process and ask you the kinds of key questions that will help you know how to develop a budget. And then you start fundraising. You don't want to fundraise until you know what you need and what it's going to take. You don't want to fundraise without any values, and you don't want to fundraise without a mission statement. Now you say, well, I haven't gotten recognized for the 501c3. There is a possible avenue for starting your work before you're recognized, and that would be to find a sponsoring organization that's willing to be your fiscal agent. Now they're going to give you oversight, and it's going to be pretty tight oversight because their name is on the line. But if you know an organization that you can partner with, that you would be complimentary to, they might be willing to let you operate under their umbrella until the 501c3 comes through from the IRS. But start fundraising, start asking for commitments, and start with yourself and your key people and your board, so that everyone has skin in the game. Everyone believes with their wallets in what you're doing. And of course, now it says incorporate your new nonprofit. So we're in a different paradigm, different structure, and you file for tax exempt status. So really, you sit down before you even have an organization, and you work on this concept. This is your concept building. This is your dream building stage. So I'm ready for the next slide, Ms. Christina. Thank you. What's your purpose? Why are you here? What needs in the community are you trying to address? You describe your overall purpose in the mission statement. You may have a longer statement that builds your case, but what are you trying to address? And then later, as you develop a vision and a larger purpose, and as you implement your programs and your plans, and you draw a picture of a future that does not yet exist, but if you fulfill your mission, and if you carry out your purpose, and if you do what you have a passion to do, what will the community look like with specific regard to that need in a few years? How will your presence in the community as an active organization change the landscape and the color, the hue, the view of the community that you live in and you're trying to address? And in order to reach that vision, you have to say, what's the need? What's the need we're here for? All right, next slide. So you need to answer these 10 questions to get there. What's the mission? What's the mission? I think I've talked about that a lot. What are you here to do? Short, very short statement that you can memorize. You can put it on a business card. You can put it in one line under your name on your website. You can splatter it all over Twitter, Facebook. It'll fit in a Twitter tweet. I think now it's 288 characters. I come from the 144 character early beginnings, but it'll fit because you have carefully constructed it and you have been parsimonious. You know, you've been stingy with words to get it down to something that is a pinpoint focus for your organization. And by the way, this mission statement is not just to get you money, it's your guiding principle. And so as you sit down with your board in the future and your staff in the future, as you consider the kind of grants you're going to apply for, the kind of programs you're going to launch, you're going to ask yourself, is this a program that will serve our mission to serve our community in this way. And if not, you need to suspect something we call mission drift. And you need to suspect whether you really ought to be doing that or not. Why? Second question, why should donors trust your organization? Put yourself in the shoes of your donor. Would I give to this organization? Would I trust this organization? I don't care who you are. You can be a member of the Rockefeller family, but you have limited resources. I grew up with a fellow who went to work in the nonprofit sector, and his organization found out that he had grown up with a family that I'd grown up with, who were some of the wealthiest people in our state of Virginia. And they were very generous people. They had a couple of organizations that they gave to that they almost sustained. But when they found out that he knew these people, they pressured him to make an ask, which means make a phone call to, in this case, the wife of this couple handled all the charitable giving. He called her up. He was so nervous. He called her up and he had to make the case. Why should I give to your organization? But you know what she told him? She was a gazillionaire, you know? She said, right now we're overcommitted. All we can do is make a small donation. And sure enough, within 2 weeks, they got a check for $500 just because he made a phone call. But she said, we cannot make any significant contribution because we are overcommitted. You say, well, why would multimillionaires be overcommitted? Because anybody can become overcommitted. You only have so much money to give. Why should I give it to you? And so you ask that question of yourself, then you can make the case when someone asks you. What can your organization offer donors in exchange for a donation? Well, you can't offer them anything of material value because at the end of the year, when you give them a donor certificate or regularly when you give it, which is a very good also practice, somewhere on that letter, it says nothing was received in exchange for this, nothing of material value. So you can't give things away for material value. Otherwise it becomes a purchase and not a donation. But what you can offer them is something far more valuable to people who believe in giving. Regular project updates, recognition in an annual report, naming opportunities. And then, you know, if you fund a building for me, I might name that building after you. I'd be happy to name that building after you. Would you like to fund a building? I know a few that need to be built. Then be ready to answer the question, what have you done so far? What has your organization accomplished to date? How many individuals have you helped? What communities? How have you helped them? If you ever sit down to begin to write a grant, you need to have this information ready. In fact, you need to have it on a template that you're updating because you're going to be asked this question day in and day out. You're going to be asked this question over and over again. Number 5, can you share 1 or 2 stories of individuals whose lives have been changed because of your organization? Now, always ask their permission before you share their stories, but let me tell you something you learn in sales and you learn it in nonprofit work. Facts tell, but stories sell. Do people give with their cognitive reasoning or with their hearts? Well, look at the appeals that are made and that are successful, and you'll discover that even though people think about it and people read reports and some people are very analytical in their giving, people tend to be motivated to give by their hearts. They want to see flesh on that story. You can rattle off statistics all day long, but if they don't see people who have been helped, by what you do, communities that have been strengthened by what you do. That's why pictures are so important. A nonprofit leader needs to have a camera handy. Thank goodness for cell phones that have cameras on them and video. And you need to be ready to pull out that camera and take pictures of people benefiting from what you do and people enjoying being volunteers in your organization. Stories, 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 stories. Flood the world with stories. If you're not a warm, fuzzy type, cultivate that and surround yourself with people that are. Next slide. What are your organization's goals this year? If you haven't set any new goals, you haven't been doing your work as an organization of planning. So you want to do strategic planning so you know what you want to accomplish this year. You want to take steps forward. And so what do you want to accomplish this year? Because when I give to you, I want to give for your goal. I want to help you with a goal. Why are your goals important? Well, if you don't know where you're going, your likelihood of getting there is greatly diminished. And you won't know you're there when you get there. You won't be able to measure success. A goal is important because it gives you something to aim for. It gives you something to work for, because once you have a goal, you can start developing action plans to get to that goal. I hope I'm not talking too fast or too loud or too enthusiastically, but I'm going to tell you, this stuff lights my fire in the morning. It gets me up. It charges me. This is exciting stuff. So if I sound a little too excited, I'm sorry. I'm really a very laid back guy. But what would you accomplish? Number 8. What would happen if your organization was not able to accomplish its goals? Let me ask you a question. What would happen if your hospital was not able to keep its operations going? How would that affect the community? What would happen? What if an organization that serves children in your community was not able to expand its reach to serve 10, 20, 100 more children next year? Well, those are people that would not be served, right? In case of the hospital, those are people that would either remain sick and some would die. See, I want you to think about that as you weigh this question, that there may be grave consequences of you not reaching your goal, and you are inviting people into the process of thinking about that for the betterment of your community. Number 9, how much money do you need from donors to accomplish your goals? You go in, you have something in mind. We used to spend more time going into someone's office, knocking on the door, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith. I'm representing this organization. You tell your story and you make an ask. What we would like for you to do today is make a donation of $5,000 for this purpose. Now you've done your homework. You're not over asking, you're not under asking. It might be less, it might be more, but give them an idea. Now, what are they going to do? Well, they could say, I can give more. Or they could say, I could give less. But my friend who went to our friend by phone and made a major ask, at least got a $500 check for his organization. Wouldn't you rather have a $500 donation for a 5-minute call that didn't go quite the way you wanted it to than nothing? It's a numbers game. But you need to know what you need. Don't be vague about your asks. Don't be vague about what you need. You need $100,000 to do this project, or you need $7,500 to do this project. Be able to understand that, because that's going to send a message to the donor. And the message to the donor is this money is being well managed, and this organization thinks about what it needs, and it knows how to write a budget and take care of business. Don't be vague. Number 10, how can donors help other than making financial contributions? Someone says, I'm a little tight right now. How can I help? Can you introduce me to 5 people that might be able to help? That would be one thing, wouldn't it? In fact, you want to get those introductions. Can you invite 10 of your, and of course, this is going to be post-COVID, can you invite 10 of your friends to an after-work mixer where we can share our vision? Or maybe they can give in-kind gifts. Or maybe they can host an event for you. Or maybe they can introduce you to a leader in the community or in government that can open a door for you. Or maybe they can set aside a day where they offer 20 of their employees to come out and do a project with you. When we were building a playground in a neighborhood here in Fresno, and we were working with an organization called Kaboom. It's a national playground building nonprofit. And we were working with the 7-Up bottlers for the area who were funding it. One of the things they did was send us about 50 volunteers, but a lot of other organizations send us volunteers. So there are things people can do for you other than give cash. I realize how important money is. You know, someone has said, money is that thing when that is what you need, nothing else will quite do. But that's not entirely true. Other things can be very, very helpful. And they can count as donations sometimes when you are building a case with a foundation saying, we have community support. But that's deeper than we want to go today. Next slide. What does it cost to start a nonprofit? Well, you have to do your paperwork, and there's some filing fees, and $750, but your fee can be reduced by $400 if your revenue is not going to exceed $40,000. You're going to have a pretty well-funded new nonprofit if you earn and gain $40,000 in the first year. So it's really going to be a shoestring to start your nonprofit and apply for a 501c3. And again, there are people that can help you. If you apply for a mentor, we might be able to connect you with some of those people or help you figure out where to look for them. Because it is a process that you want to understand deeply. Or you can, if you're a fast learner, there are resources out there for you. Usually takes 2 to 12 months. I think right now I'm hearing a lot of people who are getting them through in about 6 months, and you need to be patient, but you also need to know that it's probably not going to take more than 12 months. All right, next slide. You got to have a good name. What's your name? Your words need to be descriptive. A strong name should embody the mission of your organization. Now, you should be able to tell a story about your name. There's something that is compelling about your name. But understand you are going to also influence how that name rings a bell. I have no idea what was in the mind of the founders of Apple Computer when they named a computer an Apple. And so forth. But or Google, or Yahoo. You know, a Yahoo used to be something else, but now a Yahoo is a platform that had a period of time where it was extremely successful and influential. But your name should describe you. You're not going to change the mindset of a nation with a local nonprofit. So it should tell the story or enable you to tell the story. And make sure it's easy to spell, because do you know how to spell Cuyahoga without looking it up? In 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio caught fire, but your Google or your whatever search engine you use will help you spell it, but you want your donors to be able to spell your name. And you want to be able to spell your name. Choose one that's easy to say. and choose a name that's easy to remember. And one way is to create an acronym for it. I served on the board for a number of years of an organization called Fresno Interdenominational Refugee Ministry. But fortunately, most people know it just by its acronym, FIRM. And so I can say out that whole name, but if I say FIRM, most people know what that is. Next slide. Most people in the nonprofit realm. Can I run my nonprofit? Alone, no. The answer is no. You cannot run a nonprofit by yourself. And you can't own it. You can't own it. You do not own a nonprofit. I know you'll hear people say that he owns that nonprofit. No, you don't own it. The community owns it. The government does not own it. This ethereal thing called the community owns it. You're responsible to them. Your books are open. People can come in and ask to read your financial statements. Ownership is the major difference between a for-profit business and a non-profit organization. For nonprofit business a for-profit business can be privately owned and can distribute earnings to employees or shareholders, but that income cannot be distributed to persons. The income from a nonprofit. So here, you could be an executive director of a nonprofit corporation, but your bosses determine your salary. Your bosses are your board of directors. They become your collective boss. They're not individually your bosses. Collectively, they're your boss. And you're responsible to them. And they set a salary. They can't say, you can't say this, we're going to pay you 20% of everything that comes in from donations. No, that's not legal. And it's not fair, and it's not ethical, and it's not going to work. That would be profit. You can't make a profit. You can make a salary, but it's subject to review by the board of directors. I hope that makes sense. And if it needs any further clarification, I can do it later. Next slide. Challenges of starting a nonprofit. Well, 6 things you need to know. You need to know your business plan. And other people are going to need you to know your business plan. It'll assist you with organizing the concept and the mission statement, and it provides clarity for the strategies you need. And that's your overall business plan. Some people will call it, and you may call it eventually, a strategic plan. But how strategic it is going to depend on how strategic you are in developing it and implementing it. But I, in running nonprofits, have often had more than one business plan, because we develop a business plan for every new program, for every new venture. It may not be a complicated business plan, but it's a plan. But it all comes under the umbrella and focuses on the overall mission of the organization, and it becomes one of the pillars that supports the whole mission. You need to know about tax exempt status. You need to educate yourself that. You need to know what your strategic goals are. What are you going to accomplish? And how will you know when you've accomplished it? How are you going to manage volunteers? It's a really big issue, and it's a growing issue. And in a time where we're depending more and more on volunteers, and the successful nonprofit organizations have a good pool of volunteers and have a good on-ramping process for volunteers and a good screening process for volunteers, and treat their volunteers with a great deal of dignity and appreciation, and train them. And really, they are like non-paid employees. Now, don't use the term employee with them, because that can create legal confusion, but their importance to you is at that level. And sometimes their productivity is greater. Just an aside. You have to manage, you have to have a plan for managing volunteers, building partnerships. You just can't be out there all by yourself. The silo mentality is, I'm here all by myself. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in this community where I live and serve. It doesn't work in any community. We are a part of something bigger. I understand that we are competing for funds. I understand that there are only so many dollars in circulation. But you know what? There are far more dollars in circulation than we think, and than we are accessing. And actually, charitable giving has not declined with the economy in times of economic stress. Charitable giving has remained very stable and has often increased. Now, it's not across the board, and a lot of us thought that when some of the tax structure changed, that charitable giving would go by the wayside because, the standard deduction is much higher now. And so you have to give a lot of money for it to affect your taxes. But still people give. And often it's people in the lower income brackets that give. I think churches have found that out a lot, that individuals who are in lower income brackets actually give a higher percentage of their income than people in higher income brackets. So don't sell anyone short. But also don't sell short the partnerships that you can forge in the community. I want to know who you're working with. And a lot of people that are writing, making grants to you, that want to fund you, they're going to say, who are you working with? What other organizations are you working with? Who do you know? And they like to see multiple names and multiple organizations on some proposals. In fact, there are some proposals that will not get any funding if it's just one organization. So you need to be generous with your understanding of who's out there with you, and not build a silo around yourself. It'll pay off for you because people want to help you and they want to work with you. And we're all in this to see the community better. It may sound naive, but it works. So build the partnerships and then fundraise. Now, your board needs to help you fundraise. They may not be great fundraisers, but they know people that are. They need to give something. They need to give something so that if they do ask, they can say, I'm a donor too. The executive director needs to be able to ask, but you're not going to have any resources for doing what you need to do unless in your organization you develop a capacity for raising funds to fund it. Okay, next slide. You say that's probably the most important, and Tom didn't take much time with it, but we are here to help you with that. Minimum board members. The IRS generally requires a minimum of 3 board members for every nonprofit, but doesn't dictate board term length, any of that. That's all in your bylaws. The strength of your board members and burnouts should, for that reason, you should consider a rotation in new members. Can walk with you through that process, but that's true. You shouldn't expect someone to be a board member for life. You talk about this stuff at your annual retreat, but it goes in your bylaws. Typically a board, you may have a 3-year term, just for instance, for a board member, and then the member could be elected by the board for another 3-year term, and then typically there's a rotation off for at least a year. You want to keep your former board members engaged with you, but you don't want to burn them out, and you don't want to create a lifetime position, because they're there to serve the community. They are they represent your organization legally to the community. They're the ones that are responsible fiscally and financially to the community, and they hire the executive director, who is the only employee of the board. Everyone else reports to the executive. But here's the deal. In California, you have to have 3 officers. They don't have to be members of the board. They might as well be. But you have to report to the Secretary of State 3 officers, a president, a secretary. Now that's not your office manager, a secretary who runs. This is someone who has that official capacity as they're responsible for the minutes and for making sure that the records are kept. They don't necessarily do the secretarial work. And a treasurer who may or may not do the financial management for the organization, but oversees it and asks the right questions. is the official fiscal chief financial officer for the organization. So you have a chief executive officer who's typically an executive director or a president. And I'm not sure exactly what the language is on the form you fill out every year. And a secretary and a treasurer. So you have to have those, and they can be members of your board, unless your executive director is who is paid is the president. Next slide. How do you select a board member? Well, I have a great paper that I can provide for you on one of the links that I've set up called The 10 Responsibilities of Board Members. But you need to look for people who either have an expertise in a specific area which can help your corporation, and they do. You need to put a face on people and say, why is this person a good fit for us? What do we need? Now, I served an organization that I helped start in Fremont, California, in the Tri-City area back in the 80s. And we enlisted a judge to be on our board. Now, the question would be, good, I got a judge on my board, so I don't need an attorney for our board. No, in fact, the judge was legally precluded from giving us legal advice. But he said, you can watch my eyebrow. And if I raise an eyebrow, then that means you need to consult an attorney about this. So we were very glad to have the judge. He opened a lot of doors for us, gave us a lot of credibility, and judges are supposed to be wise. So he brought us a lot of wisdom, but he could not be our attorney. Neither can another board member who is an attorney on your board. But they know how to read reports. So if you're providing social services, you don't want every member of your board to be a social worker, because you're going to be kind of lopsided in the view you get. Leadership and management experience, especially related to business. If you're an organization that gathers around any particular kind of cause, need, or interest, you don't want just the people who are experts in that. You need people who are experts in money, in fundraising, in other things that can bring value to your community. In fact, you should sit down as a board. The board chooses the board, even though the executive is going to have a very key role in recruiting and building the relationships. But what you want to do is think about this as a board. What are the gaps we have? What are the gaps we have? Now, I just saw a question flash. I haven't been reading the questions. What incentives do you give to people to be a part of the board? And I remember being on some board retreats in years past. Why do we tell people we want them on the board? Man? One particular board, the guy was a mayor. He was on the internal cabinet of the mayor of San Jose. He was one of the few people that could walk into her office any time of day or night and have an audience with her without an appointment. And he said, well, I want to be able to tell my children that their dad did something. I want them to know that their dad did something in the world and in the community for which he didn't get paid. I've served on boards because I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference. I want to feel like I am a part of something that is bigger than I am, bigger than my own vision, bigger than my own ability to accomplish anything. I want to be a part of a solution. I want to sit down. I want to go to that annual meeting and say, wow, I never understood how much we were affecting people's lives. And I feel so good about being a part of this. That's why you need to honor these people. You need to pump them up. They can also get really valuable experience. It's a school of life. They can learn about things that they didn't know about. And so these are transferable skills. They need to be committed to what you're doing. You don't want a person who's not committed to it. They need to have the time and energy to devote to board duties. So do you look for people who are not busy? I've found that that's one of the least successful approaches that I've ever used. Busy people often can find time, but you don't want to find somebody who's on 4 or 5 boards. That's too many. But you don't necessarily want someone who's not busy and doesn't have a full calendar. So there's a balance in there. So they need to have time and energy. Now, how do they know if they have the time and energy? You know ahead of time and you tell them how much time it's going to take and what's expected of them. You put it in paper and you put it in oral communication. We need you to attend a monthly meeting or a bi-monthly meeting or a semi-annual, whatever it is. Semi-annual is not really enough. But we need you to be able to attend this meeting and devote about 2 hours for that meeting or an hour and a half for that meeting. And then we need you to be willing to serve on a committee that is going to meet for an hour every month. And we would like for you to show up for our annual retreat, planning retreat, and then tell them how many hours. So don't overload them with other volunteer activities in the organization. Now, when I was a board president, I really wanted to be at a lot of the key events that organization was doing just to show my support, but not necessarily 2 hours before it started to help with setup, although there were some that I've always done that with because I wanted to, and you know, all the way through cleanup. So then integrity and lack of conflict of interest. You should have a process each year where your board members sign a conflict of interest statement, namely, if there is one that looks like it might be a conflict of interest, they disclose it, and they set themselves away from decision making that involves that conflict. But mainly, they don't want to have a lot of conflict, any real significant conflict of interest. But integrity, to have your values integrated with your behavior. Next slide. There's much more to that, and it's not given nearly enough attention, but I would encourage you to spend a lot of time thinking about the recruiting of board members. Now, the governing principles of your organization are your mission and who creates it. Well, you know, really, you are the founder, perhaps, and you have done this, but your board is going to have to wrestle with this too. You need to bring this to your board to wrestle with and to adopt. And, you know, if you already have it in place and you're looking for board members, you put it out there and say, can you buy into this? But these statements, these purposes and values, as they evolve, they become a board function. Oversight, that includes legal, ethical, fiduciary responsibilities. You do this with the executive director, you evaluate performance and effectiveness, and you do this, you evaluate as a board. The board evaluates the effectiveness of the organization and the policies of the organization, but also the effectiveness of the executive director. The board doesn't evaluate specifically the effectiveness of all the staff members. If the staff is not functioning properly, it's the executive that they ask about it. And how can we help you develop the policies that will help you manage your staff more effectively? And then, of course, if an executive can't manage the staff, then that executive needs some more training or may need to be replaced. And I'm not in this to talk about people getting replaced, but you can learn that skill. Resources, key challenges, financial and human resource development. I read a book several years ago, AAA approach to fundraising and board management, and it boiled 3 functions on a continuum down to 3 A's. Board members as askers, board members as advocates, and board members as Well, you know what? You don't ever want to pass 65 and then just stop learning. As ambassadors. Now, you may be more of an advocate than an ambassador. You may be more of an ambassador than an asker. But the board has to have all three of those things. But the other is, and I throw this in, a fourth A, accountability. No one is responsible for accountability as much as the board. And so a board member that can't read a financial report needs to learn how to read a financial report. Even if you're like me and you hate reading financial reports, you got to learn. You got to just suck it up and learn to read a financial report. In fact, part of the ongoing training of your board should be, and maybe from the financial officer, the bookkeeper, or the accountant, how do you read this financial report? And then the board is doing outreach. They serve as ambassadors to the community. They should have business cards. They should put their board membership on their LinkedIn profile. They should identify themselves as a community. You should identify them on your stationery and your website. These are people that give your organization credibility. Next slide. I'm not looking at the clock. Hopefully I'm doing the time okay. How do you find these people? Well, you start with your volunteers. Maybe, I'm not saying that all volunteers can be board members, and I'm not saying that all board members need to be volunteers in some other area of the organization, but you can talk to them. You can ask them if they know someone. Consider your donors. Donors make good board members sometimes. Ask your current board members and staff for nominations or recommendations. Reach out to those beyond your nonprofit, like youth or people in business or from other organizations. The bottom line is develop relationships that lead you to other relationships. Talk to people who can introduce you to people. And when you go to someone, have two questions if you think that they would be a good board member. And don't ask them right off the top of it. You go into the conversation with, I'm looking for some ideas. I'm looking for some support, because you want support from someone who may or may not join your board. If everything works out, and if the application process works out, and if the background works out, and if your conversation works out, you have a good feeling about them, you might want to ask them to be a member of the board. But you might also want to ask them if they know people that would share your sense of vision and the mission of this organization that you could talk to. So you ask for referrals. Let's go ahead. Next slide. A typical organization structure has the board of directors at the top. They're responsible for fulfilling the mission of the organization, not for increasing profits, because you're not making profit, you're a nonprofit. They have an active role in fundraising and some outreach activities. For instance, you have an important issue that's coming before the city council. You might want your board there to be with you, to stand with you, maybe to speak. You may not, as a executive, have time to get to all the Kiwanis Club meetings or the Rotary Club meetings that need a speaker, and you can send a board member to represent you. Maybe do a television spot or something like that. There's no substitute for the face of the founder or the leader or the executive, but sometimes you need to be represented by the board member who is conscientious enough to say, I'm here representing, I'm gonna just pull a name up. I'm here representing Ivan Garcia today, who's the leader of our organization. Sorry to pick on you, Ivan, but you seem like you've got a great name. They're responsible for hiring the executive director and setting the salary and job description. The executive director helps to develop the policy for a board approval, is generally not a voting member of the board, especially not if they get a salary, and they manage the implementation of policy. They are key. They are key. And if you're ever in a transition period, as I've been, between executive directors, you will know that you have entered into that space of board membership that is one of your most significant roles. That is choosing the leader for the next stage of that organization's development. And I went through that process about 10 years ago, and it was awesome. and awe-inspiring because that organization had played such a significant role in the community, and it was absolutely vital that we choose the right person, and we did, thank goodness. The staff implements policies by delivering the service or making a product, but they can't receive ownership options. And a must checklist, D&O insurance for nonprofit boards. Okay, here's this. That's directors and officers, D&O. I would never serve on a board that did not indemnify and insure me as a board member, because I can't afford to have my house in paying off lost litigation because of something the organization did. Now, generally, board members are fairly indemnified if they do their due diligence. But if you have a board member that never attends a meeting and never reads a financial report, and never raises a question, is that person doing their due diligence? No. Are they subject to financial repercussions if the organization is sued? Possibly. And the minutes will reflect, your minutes will reflect who was at the meetings. And so to just give an extra layer of protection, insure them. Have them in your policy. Your insurance agent who insures the organization already knows about this. If you're working with someone who knows how to insure nonprofit corporations. So get the insurance. Next slide.
Okay, folks, we are getting close to the end. You've got 8 more slides to go, and there's a lot of good questions coming in the queue, and hopefully we'll be able to get to those very shortly. So thank you very much. Hang in there.
Thank you, Peter. That's my cue to talk fast. The 5 challenges and solutions: money, membership, recruitment and retention, staffing and volunteers, technology, decision-making. I think that goes without saying. Next slide. Do your homework as you set up a nonprofit. Be able to set out the need and explain what you're going to do about that. It's going to be very important when you write a grant. Writing a grant, what we mean by that is asking an organization to give you money. Next slide. Your sources of income are going to be fees for goods and services. You say, well, we're not a for-profit organization. That doesn't mean you can't sell something. And it doesn't mean you can't sell a service. It just means the profit can't go to an individual. But we call that in the nonprofit world earned income. And it is going to become more and more important as money becomes tighter. Individual donations, this is your heart and soul. If I were a funder, I would want to know, do you have a base of people that believe in you enough to give? Bequests, that's painless money that people give because they've died and they put it in their will. Foundation grants, banks, foundations, organizations that have already set up an infrastructure for giving of money away to community benefit organizations. The government, you may think that they deliver all the services. There is a vast territory of services that governments do not deliver directly, but they use community benefit organizations to deliver. And then loans, program-related investments, and this will probably be pretty least on your list, but if you buy a building, you're going to probably have a loan. Next slide. You might have a membership program. And so this is a part of your organization. You may, if you're I can think of churches and religious organizations that are governed by boards, but they also have a membership. And so there's usually an onboarding plan for them. Maybe that your membership is a community of your volunteers, but you need to have a community that says, I'm a part of this. And you want to have a way of getting people in and greeting them. You need to have a process for cultivating them. And so we can go over this with you in a mentoring process, but know that this slide is here. Next slide.
Just an ad lib on that last slide, Tom. This is the model we use at SCORE, just as an example. And this works very well for nonprofits also.
Yeah, SCORE has members, and those that creates buy-in. And when somebody comes around and asks for something, well, I'm a part of that. The recruitment of volunteers is extremely important. It's just like recruiting people who are donors. What is the benefit? Well, that's not money. It's not the t-shirt. You may actually get a t-shirt somewhere along the line. You're a walking advertisement for the organization. But the benefits that people receive from volunteering and from giving are not tangible, but they're very, very real. And your recruitment needs to be very careful. You can't just say anybody can come do it. You're going to need to screen your volunteers, especially if they work with kids. You're going to have a very extensive screening process, even though it's really simple and not hard. But ask your sister organizations, put the word out, have a formal onboarding process for your volunteers. When I come in, I became a volunteer with SCORE just late last year. And they had a very extensive onboarding process, I guarantee you. And I was interviewed and I filled out an application. I'm sure that had a benefit for the organization, but it also had a benefit for me in saying, this is important enough that they're willing to put in time and effort for it. Okay, next slide. How do you retain these people? Well, I think that having been in a lot of organizations through the years, retention is mostly about relationship. You get in for one reason, but you fail to get out because you've developed relationships. But also, and very important, significance. Am I making a difference? Is my investment of time and is my investment of money making a difference? Is this the best way for me to use this limited time I have, and how am I being recognized? And there are many ways you can recognize people, and it's really important. So the care and feeding of your volunteers is something you need to give careful attention to before you start recruiting them. Next slide. And then staffing. As you come to that wonderful place where you both need and can afford staff, understand that employee has a different level of responsibility, a daily level, and is getting something for a check. You have to understand about payroll taxes. You have to pay payroll taxes. You have to decide whether this person is hourly or salaried. By the way, the ability to use someone as an independent contractor is shrinking. If you tell them when to show up or where to show up to, they're not an independent contractor. You're telling them what to do. If you tell them how to do their job, they're not an independent contractor. If they're a plumber and they come in to fix your plumbing, they're probably an independent contractor, but they've got their own workers' compensation, and you give them a different form at the end of the year, and you treat them differently, and they send you a bill. But mostly these people you pay, if you pay them, they're probably employees. You got to know about workers' compensation. You need to do some HR work. You need to put together a manual, a human resources manual. And you need to decide, are we gonna sit out and write these checks or do these bank transfers to their accounts, or are we gonna use a payroll service? The more employees you get, the more sense it makes to use a payroll service. I will tell you that, but you will decide, unless you have a really great accounting department and have the time and effort, resources to do that. And you're gonna have turnover. It's always been an issue in the nonprofit sector because frankly, nonprofits don't pay as well as the independent sector. People get into nonprofit work because of love and because of a sense of mission, and not because they want to get rich. And so the actual turnover rate is about 19% per year, and it outpaces the other sector by 12%. Next slide. But be very careful about that, because that's where you can lose money, credibility, and all kinds of sleepless nights. So you want to market it. Marketing your nonprofit is a plan you need in addition to your business plans. You got, who's my target market? How will I measure the goals? You got to have good material, attractive material. You need to master social media, especially if you want to reach the next generation and have them support you. You need to keep your website updated. You have to have a very good database. You have to be able to capture the data, get the names and contact information of people, and stay in touch with them. You need to be able to showcase your results and form partnerships. Marketing, we're going to need another workshop for that. We need a workshop on board training. We need a workshop on marketing. I don't know if we'll be able to do those, but I can do them. And anyway, next slide. Digital marketing. You're going to have to master some technologies. And again, we can mentor you through some of this. You're going to have to get a domain name. You need to find a web host. You're going to have to develop your website. You don't want to make it an ugly website. You need a fundraising platform. People are not writing checks anymore. And so they expect to be able to go online and make their donation within a few minutes. And no muss, no fuss, and you keep good records and you report back to them for their tax purposes. And you need a contact management system. You need to have some automation in your marketing system. You need to effectively use email. You need to effectively use social media. And here's one situation where more is better, and more and more and more is better and better. And then you need teamwork. You don't want one person doing it all. Next slide. Who's the decision maker? Well, your daily decisions are made at the staff level, but your important decisions, your long-lasting decisions, your budgets, your board memberships, your policies, your oversight, that's what your board is for. They are the legal, financial, tax, repercussion go-to people. And if there are any repercussions in any of those areas, your board needs to know about it and needs to sign off on those kinds of decisions. Next slide. What do nonprofits need most? Well, they need to develop an organizational structure that supports financial sustainability. And then they need to be willing to embrace change. Next slide. And just so you know, the information here has come from reliable sources, but in setting up your organization, you may need some professional services regarding your nonprofit status. And I want to tell you a little bit about the slide before we get to questions about the resources. I've just given you a very few resources. Next slide. One is Candid. Some of you already know about the Foundation Center or GuideStar. Foundation Center lists all the foundations that give away money and their criteria. It's an excellent resource. GuideStar lists all the nonprofit organizations and accesses their end of the year financial reports. Now they have merged and they've become Candid. You find them at candid.org. BoardSource is your go-to premier resource for nonprofit management and information. There's a membership fee. There are various levels of it. Central Valley Community Foundation is the local clearinghouse for a lot of local grants here in the Central Valley. Giving Tuesday is a Facebook page that I set up for people to collaborate and where I will put links that I couldn't get here. And then I just wanted to put in some Amazon resources that you can start using today. And a couple of you I've told about this, and so here it is, but I will send it to you in email. And that's all I need to say before we get questions, Peter, and sorry I took so long.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, everyone. So just want to say that just visit our website, centralvalleyscore.org, and click the top left button right here that says Find a Mentor, and it'll take you to a short form so you can fill out so we can get a SCORE mentor to help you. And before we get to the Q&A, we're just going to launch a quick exit poll, and that's going to be coming up on your screen here. And we just have 2 questions. We'll give you about 30 seconds We would like to know, would you like to have a mentor help you with your nonprofit idea? And how would you rate today's presentation and facilitator, Tom Sims? Give it about 20 seconds. Tom, in the meantime, do you want to let everybody know what your background is? Somebody asked, you obviously had a lot of experience with running nonprofits, and what's your background in?
Well,
We'll get that to the Q&A, Christina. Let's finish the survey first, please.
Okay, sure. Okay, a couple more people we're just waiting on.
While I wait for the survey, Tom, thank you very much for hosting today's webinar with your background experience, which you're going to share with the folks here in a minute. We have a lot of information here, but there's a lot of questions in the Q&A. And just for the folks on the call, would you like to have a roundtable discussion with Tom and some other folks next week as a follow-up to dig deeper into maybe some of the questions you may have? And I think I put a date on the calendar here for next week, next Thursday, Tom, if you're available. And all the people on this call, we can sit around for a couple hours and intake their personal questions in more details, and we'll try to reach all the questions for today. Sorry, Christine.
Looks like that's a yes, Peter. We have like maybe 10 people saying yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
Great. I just want to share the results real quick with everyone. 86% of you want a mentor. So I showed you how to find a mentor, centralvalleyscore.org, click on find a mentor, and we receive your request instantly. So your request will be assigned to a mentor and someone will reach out to you. And Tom, great job. You received 100% for your presentation today. So let's go ahead and get to the Q&A.
Awesome, Tom. That means you get an extra cup of coffee tomorrow. Thank you. Go ahead and tell the folks about your background, Tom. And the reason why you were chosen to do this webinar is because of your background. So can you share that with the folks?
Sure. I started life and have continued to be in church ministry. I've been a clergyman for my professional career, but I've also, as a extension of that role, I've been an executive director of 2 organizations, and I have been a founder of several, and I have been a board member and board chair for a number of organizations. And then I led one fairly significant organization through a 1.5-year transition period where I was supervising 2 interim executive directors. So I've done both in the last 45 years, but as you may know, a church is a nonprofit organization, and a pastor is an executive director of that organization. And so my nonprofit experience outside of that really has helped me in the management questions. And that also a brief stint in denominational leadership through my denomination. So I've been in nonprofit work pretty much ever since I've been in California. I moved to California in 1979. And very early on, I started being a member of boards and being chair of boards and actually being the go-to person for the executive director. As a result, I've benefited from some very good training that has been available in the community. So I've been in and out of it all for a long time. And I'm very excited to be a part of SCORE now, where I can give back some of that in terms of coaching and mentoring.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. You've been a big asset to our chapter here, but to the many folks you've dealt with over the years, importantly. And we have scheduled a roundtable for everybody that's on this call, and Christina will send you the link to join what we call a nonprofit roundtable to discuss your questions in more details in a 2-hour session on March 4th from 9 to 11 a.m. Are you okay with that time, Tom?
Yes.
On your calendar?
Yeah. 9 to 11.
March 4th. That's next week.
Yes,
I'll be sure to include the link to everyone
Well,
in
what
my
is it?
follow-up email.
Yeah, we want to be sure Tom's available. And Bob and Barton. Barton's on board here, and he's a CPA, and he works with nonprofits also. So we want to be sure we have a good panel for the folks. So let's go ahead and open up the questions. And thank you, everybody. And we hope you get your nonprofit started, because the community kind of needs that right now, post the pandemic for this year. So let's go ahead and
Thank you, Peter. So can founders of NPOs be in the payrolls or get paid for traveling or other expenses?
yes. You will probably step down from being a voting board member, and you'll become an employee if you're getting paid. You know, reimbursement for travel expenses can also be offered to volunteers and board members. There's no restriction on that. That's an expense. So I've been a volunteer and a board member, and there've been places I needed to go I couldn't afford to go on my own. Now that you know what my day job has been, you might understand that a little better. But you can be reimbursed for your expenses. You're not probably going to have a lot of expenses. You're not supposed to, not as many as the executive, but yes, as a founder, you can you can transition into being a paid staff member or a paid executive director, but that's going to be a board decision. It could be understanding you're setting it up that way. You know, I've started organizations where that presumption has been there, but you can't presume too much.
And the answer is yes, you can do that for travel, for mileage, whatever the IRS allows for mileage, 50-something cents a mile now, and a minimum per diem expense if you have to buy lunch, or if you have overnight accommodations and that sort of thing. But again, this is all approved by your board of directors, and generally the CEO of a nonprofit will be given a dollar amount or an expense account. Anything exceeding that, he has to have prior approval.
And can you specify what kind of data is needed to support and needs analysis?
You know, there's hard data and soft data. So your hard data is the demographic information that's available from several different sources. Some of it's free and some of it's government data. It needs to be specific to your target area or your target population. And it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're addressing poverty, then you need to have information about poverty. You know, what is poverty in that community? If it's education, then you need to have information that's available from the school district about where the needs are. But then also the soft data comes from talking to people and keeping track of their perceived needs. Now, I've been very impressed with the goals, and I've not addressed that at all here, of community development through asset-based community development, which gives me a bias for people in the community telling us what they need and what they can do for themselves, and recognizing their unique gifts that they bring to it. So yes, the more the better, but it needs to be targeted toward the needs you're trying to address. Does that answer that question?
Let us know if that answered your question. And can family members be on your board?
It's possible. Family members of the director, a paid director, I don't think it's advisable. It's conflict of interest. But having family members of a founder, or having, you know, for instance, if you have a family foundation, a lot of the members of that board are going to be members of that family. That's where the money's coming from. But you need to be really careful about how you stack up a nonprofit board with just family members, because it becomes a tug of war sometimes. It becomes a relationship problem, and it becomes a credibility. It becomes a credibility issue. So I don't think it's a good idea to have a spouse who's in a direct supervisory relationship as a board member over their spouse as the executive director. It doesn't look good when you go ask for money, I'll tell you that.
And that's very good advice, Tom. And I know I had one nonprofit where one of his family members was their accountant on there, and it really raised a lot of questions on there. So again, keep out the nepotism on it and keep it open because you're going to be scrutinized as a nonprofit.
Yeah, financial lack of accountability is a death knell to a nonprofit. And many have gone down in disgrace as a result of lack of accountability.
Bethany says there's a 5150 rule for nonprofit.
Bethany, I might need a little clarification. I know what a 5150 is, where you've been put on hold because you're a danger to yourself or others. Is that what you mean?
What is the best source to reach to grants and foundations, family nonprofit?
You're going to give Bethany a chance to clarify that. Read that question again for me, Christina.
Yes, what's the best source to reach to grants and foundations, family nonprofit?
Candid.com, candid.org is it, and the community foundation, the Central Valley Community Foundation, if you live here. There are people that work with community benefit organizations here. They just brought Artie Padilla on. Some of you may know Artie. He's founded Every Neighborhood Partnership to work with the community here and be a liaison. There are a number of people like that. Our former mayor, Ashley Swearingen, is the executive director there. Again, it depends on what the mission of your organization is. But if you want to really investigate the variety of grants that are available from foundations, candid.org and the Foundation Center, which is a part of that. Now, if you need help with the Foundation Center, there's a librarian at Fresno State whose entire reason for existence when she gets there in the morning till she goes home at night is to help nonprofits navigate the Foundation Center database. And she'll do workshops for you. She will take your hand and talk with you. I can't remember her name, but I could look it up in my email. And she's been very helpful to nonprofits in the past. So
Tom, here's some clarification from Bethany. She says that you can't have more family on your board. So if you have 6 board members and 4 are family, then that's a problem.
Oh, okay. That's the legal definition. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bethany. I appreciate that. You were my mentor today.
Okay, and so what are the benefits of establishing a private business versus a nonprofit? The board can squeeze you out after you get it started.
But you want to be careful how you choose your board members. And you want to have board members that are not in it for their own power trips and aren't going to have a vested interest in having anything but the best leadership they possibly can. So a nonprofit, I mean, yeah, you're going to be responsible to someone. A for-profit business, you're responsible to yourself and your banker. In other words, when you run out of money, you're probably out of business. So there are a lot of cases where a for-profit business may make sense for you. Or so you could also have a for-profit business that's wholly owned by a nonprofit. You understand what I'm saying there? That you set up a for-profit business, it has a CEO who may be a shareholder, but the primary shareholders are this organization that receives the profits. But its internal, the way it runs is on a strictly business model. And so there are some nonprofits that engage in these kind of social entrepreneurship ventures, and they set up for-profit businesses that help to support the mission of the nonprofit. So this is complex, and but it is a possibility to do that. You can also have something like, I like to refer to Tom's Shoes, Blake Mykowski. It was a strictly for-profit business, but it had a mission. You buy a pair of shoes, we give away a pair of shoes to an organization in the developing nations. Buy one, give one. And that's their model. Mykowski put it this way, you do well by doing good. And that's a whole movement. And every now and then you'll see people that are doing that show up on the Shark Tank. And that's a good place to view that. I tell my entrepreneurs that I coach, you ought to start watching the Shark Tank if you want to find out what investors are looking for. And you can learn some stuff for nonprofits too. I hope I answered that question. It's a long answer, but I need.
Yeah, Salvation Army is a good example. They have a lot of retail stores. They do retail operations out of as a nonprofit, and they get the products donated.
Now we owned 4141 Ministries, which I was executive director of. We owned a couple of businesses, but we ran them under the nonprofit, and so there was nobody making a profit, just the organization, and basically we were funding our ability to employ people. So it was an employment program, and so all of the profits went back into our ability to employ people. And another example of that would be Neighborhood Thrift here in town. And my friend who runs that organization said in the early days, he would tell people, turn the junk in your garage into jobs for my neighbors. There are a lot of ways to structure the same good thing. But the advantages of having a for-profit business is you can do whatever you want till you run out of money.
Tom, what are the incentives for people to serve on the board, and do they need to reside within the county?
No, they do not need to reside within the county. It would be helpful if they could come to a meeting, although so many meetings are on Zoom now. I'm on a board that one of our members moved to Washington State, and we really wanted her to stay, but it didn't make sense for her or for the organization, really. The incentives, I think I saw that question flash and I tried to answer it. They're non-tangible, but I would add to what I said before, and the feeling of, yes, the feeling of doing something significant that's going to last beyond your lifetime. The opportunity to make a difference, and then the educational possibility. I've represented organizations on which I served on the board at a number of workshops that even SCORE offers educational opportunities that I can't afford for its volunteers and to help us be better volunteers. It's not a perk, but the perk of it is I can apply that. That's transferable information that's added value to my life. But I will tell you, for me, this is personal. I have forged some of the richest, most meaningful and rewarding relationships in the community and have developed lifelong friendships that have enriched my life through my volunteer work with nonprofit organizations and with boards and with the volunteers and with the staff. And you can't buy that for any amount of money.
All right. Someone's asking if I can show the resources page again. I can do that.
Sure.
And are there grants to get a 501c3?
Not usually, because who are they going to give the money to? There's startup money. but I think that's that amount of money, it's almost like a proof of concept. You ought to be able to raise $1,000 by selling your vision to some people and asking them you could do crowdfunding, for instance. And we had a great workshop about a week ago on crowdfunding, and you can download it on the website. And people don't necessarily need a tax deduction for that. They just want to help something get started. So that kind of funding is possible, but I would go out and ask people for that money and then try to raise it that way. There are other startup money. It's hard to come by. It's hard to come by startup money, you know. And grants, by the way, will never fund 100% of your organization. So you may as well not start with that. I used to sit down with directors and say, if you accept this grant and they give you $100,000, how much is it going to cost you to take that money? And the chances are it's going to cost, you know, the costs of the program are going to be 10 or 20% more than the cost of the grant. And in the meantime, you've had to increase your infrastructure and bring on staff to manage that program. And they will pay, most grants you can put about 10% into administrative costs. But most of the money that you get in grants is going to go to direct services. So you have to develop some parallel ways of funding your organization, but that is proof of concept to the people giving you the money that your organization is of value to the community in both a perceived and realistic way. Does that make sense? If you can get money from the community, then that means that the community perceives that you are valuable to them. That's just hard truth.
Thank you, Tom.
But I'd give $20 toward you, you know, toward you starting up. And I bet a lot of other people would give $20 if you sold me on it.
Yeah, you gotta ask, right? And we have a subject matter expert volunteer on the line. He's a CPA. He asked me to mention, before you start raising money from foundations or members, you need to have the nonprofit established with the 503 license. He says you can't put the horse before the cart. In order to get the 503 status, you will of course cross hurdles. There are companies that establish or can help you get the license.
That's a good point. So 501c3 is going to mean that, you know, that money has a place to go that's tax deductible and legal. And so I think his answer on that, or her answer on that, is really really good.
And that was from Vartan. Thank you, Vartan.
Yeah, no, he's exactly right, because any money you receive for your nonprofit before your status claims is treated as ordinary income to you.
Unless it's funneled through another nonprofit that is sponsoring you. And
that is correct.
It's hard to find those, but I've been a part of organizations that have seen it as part of their mission to help some of those organizations get started. But I guarantee you, we wanted more reports than usual, and we had final say-so on anything that they did.
Well, those are all the questions we have. Thank you very much, Tom.
I've really enjoyed this, probably more than you. And I thank you for being here. And I look forward to meeting some of you in a mentoring relationship and at the roundtable next week.
Well, thank you very much, Tom and Barton, for participating. Christina, nice job. And March 3rd, Christina will send you the link, and we're going to spend 2 hours, and we're just going to be in a room, and we're going to share your ideas and what we know and don't know, and we're trying to learn something from everybody. So we will see you next week. Everybody take care. Thank you.
4th, right? Not 3rd.
The 4th.